1,160,000 people watched the same 12 minutes of television on the same Sunday night. And within an hour of that episode ending, a dozen entertainment outlets ran headlines that could have been copy-pasted from the same press release. Meghan triumphs. Ratings soar. The Duchess wins over Australia. Same angle. Same framing. Same conclusion, delivered before anyone had time to actually think about what they just watched. That's not journalism. That's a coordinated rollout, the kind you get when a network's publicity team hands out the same 3 talking points to every outlet on the list, and most of those outlets just run with it because a guaranteed traffic spike is a guaranteed traffic spike. Nobody wants to be the one publication asking follow-up questions when the story's already written and the clicks are already coming in. And tonight, we're going past the press release. This is the story of Meghan Markle's guest judge appearance on MasterChef Australia, what actually happened in that kitchen, what got left on the cutting room floor, and why the headline you saw might not be the full picture. Let's start with the basics, because even the basics got twisted. On Sunday, July 26, 2026, the Duchess of Sussex walked into the MasterChef Australia kitchen at the Melbourne Showgrounds, stepping in as a guest judge for one of the show's semi-final episodes, sitting alongside the regular panel of Po Lingyao, Sophia Levin, and Jean-Christophe Novelli. She wasn't there live. This had been filmed months earlier, back in April, during a private 4-day trip to Australia she took with Prince Harry. Reports at the time said she was filling in for regular judge Andy Allen, who was away on paternity leave. Network 10 sat on the footage for 3 months before airing it, which alone tells you this wasn't spontaneous. This was scheduled, timed, and released on the network's terms, in the exact week the show was already running a themed, viral, stretch of celebrity guest episodes. To understand why this cameo carried so much weight before a single frame had aired, you have to understand what MasterChef Australia actually is in that country's television landscape. It's not a niche cable curiosity. It's one of the network's flagship shows, built a devoted, loyal audience over close to 2 decades, and has developed a reputation for landing bigger and bigger celebrity guest judges each season, from international chefs to pop stars to Australian sporting royalty. Landing a genuine, globally recognized royal figure, even a controversial one, was always going to be treated internally as a coup. Which is exactly why the show leaned so hard into the spectacle of the reveal, rather than treating her like just another guest judge on just another Sunday. Her entrance itself was staged for maximum impact. She walked in across a rolled-out red carpet while the top 4 finalists, Vinny, Aaron, Casper, and Petro, along with the rest of the top 24 watching from the gantry above, reacted with audible shock. Po Lingyao greeted her with a hug and asked, on camera, whether she should be called Duchess. Meghan waved it off immediately, telling her to just use her first name. It's a small moment, but it's the first sign of attention that runs through the entire episode. The show wanted the royal spectacle, and she was visibly trying to downplay it in real time. She set the top 4 a mystery box challenge, with a spot in the top 3 and immunity on the line. The box was built around ingredients she said she loves cooking with: celeriac, lemons, Brussels sprouts, local honey, macadamias, Jerusalem artichoke, quince, apples, mandarins, strawberries. Partway through, Prince Harry even popped up on a video call from her phone, waving at the contestants, which the judges leaned into for the cameras. On paper, it reads like a perfectly produced, feel-good celebrity cameo. And for most of the episode, that's exactly what it was. When the episode finally aired, the numbers were real. It pulled in a national reach of over 1 million viewers and the highest average Sunday audience of the entire season. No spin needed there, that part of the headline checks out. But numbers alone don't tell you why people tuned in, and that's where this story actually starts to get interesting. Because in the weeks leading up to that Sunday, there wasn't just excitement building. There was a boycott campaign. Segments of the audience had spent months saying they'd skip the episode entirely rather than watch a royal-turned-influencer show up on a program that's supposed to be about amateur cooks chasing a dream. So when the ratings came in high, outlets rushed to frame it as pure triumph, and to be fair to them, on the pure numbers, it was a genuinely strong night for the network. What a lot of that coverage left out is that a chunk of that audience wasn't tuning in because they loved her. They were tuning in to see the car crash. Curiosity and outrage drive numbers just as effectively as adoration does, sometimes more effectively. A high rating doesn't automatically mean a warm reception. It means eyeballs. Those are two very different things, and a lot of the Sunday night coverage collapsed them into one, tidy, congratulatory headline. Now let's rewind further, because the real story isn't the ratings. It's what happened once the cameras actually rolled. Meghan didn't walk into that kitchen as a stranger to food television. She's built an entire second act around exactly this territory, a Netflix cooking and lifestyle show, a food and lifestyle brand called as ever, years of positioning herself as someone deeply connected to home cooking and family meals. Judge Po Lingyao introduced her to the room by name-checking that food brand directly, framing her as someone with a deep love of home cooking. That's the brand. That's the pitch. And for most of the episode, it held. Then came one question. Fellow judge Jean-Christophe Novelli asked her, plainly, what her favorite dish to cook for her own family was. Not a trick question. Not a gotcha. The most basic, softball, warm-up question you could ask anyone who's built a brand around home cooking. And she didn't have an answer. What she gave instead was a version of, it's a tough one, explaining that she has a lot of different palates to please at home, that Harry prefers heavier British food, meat and potatoes and cream sauce, while she leans toward grilled fish and fresh herbs and citrus. She talked about the kids being good eaters, not picky, apparently happy to eat Brussels sprouts, which got a genuinely surprised reaction from the judges. It was a real answer about real preferences, dressed in warmth. What it wasn't, was a dish. She never actually landed on one single meal, despite being asked more than once across the segment. Clips of that moment spread fast, and the online reaction was brutal, and fast, and largely merciless. Viewers pointed out the obvious gap. You don't go on a show called MasterChef, representing a food and lifestyle brand, fronting your own Netflix cooking show, and freeze on the single most predictable question in the room. One widely shared comment put it bluntly, joking that most home cooks juggling 6 different appetites could still name something as simple as a chicken salad without blinking. Another pointed out that this wasn't a random ambush question, it was, almost word for word, the exact premise of her own show. Some critics went further, digging up old footage of her chopping onions at home and mocking her knife work, or reviving jokes about a widely mocked one-pan pasta recipe she'd posted years earlier, the kind where you dump raw pasta and boiling water straight over sauce. A royal commentator, weighing in on the older clip separately, noted that the pasta method itself broke a few basic cooking conventions, regardless of what you think of her as a public figure. And the pile-on didn't stop with the clip itself. It jumped to other, unrelated complaints almost immediately, commenters accusing her of breaking format by personally calling out the 30-minute mark instead of letting the show do it the usual way, with some framing it as a deliberate grab for extra camera time rather than a harmless quirk of an unfamiliar guest not knowing the standard rhythm of the show. That particular complaint is worth flagging as exactly the kind of pile-on effect that tends to happen once one clip goes viral for the wrong reasons. Once people decide a moment reflects badly on someone, every other small, ordinary quirk from the same appearance gets reinterpreted as evidence of the same flaw, whether or not that's a fair read of what actually happened. Is any of that actually fair, though? Let's be honest about both sides of it. Struggling to name one favorite family meal on camera, under studio lights, with a room full of strangers watching and a camera crew waiting for a soundbite, isn't hard proof that someone can't cook. People blank on simple, personal questions under pressure constantly. Ask anyone who's frozen up trying to name their favorite movie the second someone asks them directly. But it's also true, and worth saying plainly, that this was the one unscripted moment in the whole episode that directly undercut the deep love of home cooking introduction almost as soon as it was said out loud. The brand and the live moment didn't match, on camera, in real time, for millions of people to see. That's not manufactured outrage from a hostile press. That's just what happened, unedited, in front of the whole panel. Now here's where it gets murkier, the money question. Because before this episode ever aired, the internet had already decided how much Meghan was being paid to be there. One figure kept circulating everywhere, $380,000 for a single day of filming. For context, Katy Perry reportedly earned around $100,000 for her MasterChef appearance back in 2020. So the idea that Meghan pulled in nearly 4 times that felt, to a lot of people, entirely plausible. It fit the narrative. Royal turns reality star, cashes in, milks the title she claims she doesn't want. Except Network 10 came out and shut that down directly. On the record, the network confirmed Meghan wasn't paid a cent for the appearance, and, notably, that she didn't promote as ever, her lifestyle brand anywhere during the episode either. No fee. No product placement. That's about as clean a denial as you're going to get, and there's no credible reporting that's contradicted it since. It's also worth putting that number in context, even the rumored 6-figure sum wasn't unprecedented for the show. Reports around the same season suggested wildlife presenter Robert Irwin was set to earn somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 for a single day of filming, specifically because the network wanted to keep him loyal after another one of his shows got cancelled. So a genuine appearance fee, for a big name, wasn't some outlandish idea. The specific figure attached to Meghan's name just happened to be the one that turned out to be fabricated. So let's be fair for a second, because the story doesn't fall apart just because one juicy number turned out to be false. The deeper tension here was never really about the exact dollar figure. It's about the optics underneath it. Meghan's team has spent years pushing back on the word royalty being attached to her name, insisting she's not trading on a title she technically still legally holds but publicly distances herself from. And yet the show's own promotional material didn't get that memo. In the teaser hyping her appearance, Po Lingyao introduced her on air as royalty, saying the kitchen had seen MasterChef royalty before, but nothing like this. If the goal was to keep the visit as unpolitical and untitled as possible, the marketing undercut that goal before the episode even aired. You can be unpaid and still be used as a royal headline. Those aren't contradictions. They're just two different things happening at once. And that royalty line didn't just create a branding headache, it kicked off its own mini-scandal. In the days before the episode aired, tabloid reports claimed that Meghan's team was furious about the royalty framing, that Po Lingyao felt so bad about the slip that she wanted to personally apologize, and that she was reportedly told by production to leave it alone instead. One outlet even ran the headline, Meghan's MasterChef meltdown. That's a dramatic story. It's also, according to the people who were actually in the room, not what happened. Weeks later, Po Lingyao addressed it herself, on the record, on Australian radio. Her account was about as far from meltdown as you can get. She described being asked about Meghan so often that she joked she'd be a billionaire if she got paid every time. She described Meghan as low maintenance and fully present, someone who stuck around with the judges instead of retreating to a green room, who was genuinely engaged with the whole process, and who, in Yao's words, clearly knew her food. She said flat out that she had nothing to complain about. When the specific meltdown headline was put to her directly, she called the framing ridiculous, and added that the whole experience had been eye-opening in a different way, not because of any conflict, but because of how intensely Meghan gets covered by the press over things that, in Yao's telling, simply didn't happen. A source close to the production backed that account up too, telling reporters there was no tension on set and that no apology was ever requested by anyone. So you've got two completely different versions of the same afternoon, an anonymous tabloid account describing simmering resentment, a judge who supposedly wanted to apologize but was blocked by production, and off-camera moments deliberately left on the cutting room floor, versus an on-the-record, named source, months later, flatly calling those claims ridiculous. I'm not going to pretend those two accounts are equally credible. One is anonymous, unverifiable, and conveniently impossible to check. The other is a named professional, putting her actual name and reputation on the record, with nothing left to gain by lying about it after the fact. Take that for what it's worth. That same pattern shows up again when you look at how contestants described working with her. Top 4 finishers Petro and Aaron both gave interviews saying she was engaged, warm, genuinely interested in their stories rather than just performing for the cameras. According to Poe, Meghan specifically said she wanted to hear the contestants' actual stories, since the judges already knew them but she was meeting them for the first time. Fellow judge Sophia Levin described the mood on set that day as joyous and energetic, with contestants visibly starstruck the second Meghan walked in. There's even a small, almost throwaway detail that humanizes the whole day more than any headline did. Poe reportedly baked her a coconut banana bread as a callback to a loaf Meghan had made herself, on a much earlier visit to Australia back in 2018, and Meghan apparently asked for the recipe on the spot. That's not the kind of detail production teams usually bother faking. Every named, on-record account of that day points in the same direction: pleasant, low drama, professional. The demanding guest version of events exists almost entirely in anonymous, unnamed sourcing, insiders, sources close to production, the kind of reporting that's nearly impossible to verify and just as conveniently impossible to disprove. Anonymous sources absolutely have their place in journalism, especially when people have real reasons to fear retaliation for going on record. But when every single named person who was physically in that room is telling you the same story, and the only pushback comes from people unwilling to put their name on it, that gap is worth noticing rather than glossing over. So where does that leave the actual thesis of this video? Not with a clean verdict, because there isn't one. What you have is a real, unscripted stumble, the family dish question, that genuinely worked against the brand she's building. You have a payment rumor that got debunked cleanly, but sat inside a broader tension about title and image that the show's own marketing team arguably made worse, not better. And you have a behind-the-scenes conflict story that, once you actually chase down who's willing to put their name on it, mostly collapses. There is a bigger picture worth flagging, and I want to be upfront that this next part is inference, not confirmed fact. This appearance didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed a few months after As Ever's partnership with Netflix officially came to an end, a split that was announced back in March, ending the retail arm of a deal the brand had launched with a lot of fanfare only the year before. It also landed in roughly the same window that reporters confirmed Meghan's team had filed a dozen trademark applications for As Ever in Australia, filings that were actually submitted back in September of 2024 and approved in June of 2025, well before any of this MasterChef speculation started. When journalists pressed her team on what that meant, a spokesperson pushed back on the idea that it signaled anything new, describing Australia as simply one of many jurisdictions where the brand is registered as a matter of routine business protection, not a sign of an imminent product launch. Still, the timing is the timing. In the same stretch, Meghan and Harry were also reportedly locking in a separate, unrelated appearance fee, this time for a Girls' Weekend retreat event in Sydney, with sources telling entertainment reporters her fee for that specific booking was in the range of $1 million, full VIP travel and accommodation included. So whatever the truth of any grand unified strategy, the broader pattern is real: multiple Australian bookings, clustered close together, arriving right as her Netflix retail partnership wound down and her media team worked to keep her visible and monetizable outside the US and UK news cycle. One PR analyst quoted in coverage around the MasterChef rating suggested the Australian appearance reads as a low-risk way to test a broader, more mainstream public rebrand, somewhere outside the constant scrutiny of the American and British press. That's one professionals read, offered publicly, not a leaked internal memo. It's plausible. It also lines up with the visible facts, the timing, the frequency of Australian bookings, the brand's search for a post-Netflix identity. But it is still, at the end of the day, informed speculation dressed up as an inside scoop, and I'd rather tell you that honestly than pretend I've cracked some hidden strategy document nobody else has seen. What we can say for certain, the ratings were real, but triumph oversells what actually happened in that kitchen. The payment rumor was false. The tension story mostly falls apart under a name and a microphone. And the one moment that actually landed a real hit, the family dish question, had nothing to do with palace PR or hidden agendas. It was just a beat of live television nobody planned for, including her. So here's my actual verdict: for what it's worth, this wasn't a disaster, and it wasn't the flawless victory lap the headlines sold you either. It was a mixed bag, filmed months in advance, released on a network schedule, wrapped in marketing that occasionally contradicted the message it was supposedly protecting. A genuinely strong ratings night sitting next to a genuinely awkward unscripted moment. A debunked payday sitting next to a real, uncomfortable question about whether the "no royal branding" request was ever really honored by the show's own promo team. A tabloid meltdown story sitting next to a room full of named people saying, on the record, that none of it happened the way it was reported. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how modern celebrity television actually works, messier than the triumphant headline, less scandalous than the tabloid version, and honestly more interesting than either extreme on its own. What happens next is the part nobody can honestly predict yet. As Ever still needs a new home after losing its Netflix retail partner. The Australian trademark filings are sitting there, approved and ready, whether or not anything comes of them. And if the pattern of high-profile Australian appearances continues, this MasterChef cameo may end up looking less like a one-off and more like the opening move in something bigger. Or it might just have been exactly what Network 10 said it was, a fun, unpaid, one-day guest spot that happened to rate well. Both of those futures are still on the table, and anyone telling you with total confidence which one is coming is guessing, same as the rest of us, headlines included. Now I want to hear from you. Was this a win for her, a stumble, or something that's honestly a bit of both? Does a debunked payday and a walkback meltdown story actually clear the air, or does the fact that those rumors existed and spread so fast in the first place tell you something on its own about how she's covered? Drop your verdict in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that, I actually go through them. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, a like genuinely helps more than you'd think, and subscribe if you want more of this ongoing coverage, because this story isn't finished yet, and neither is her next Australian appearance, whatever it turns out to be. Fame at this level is never just a headline. It's a moment in time.